as we look back on your career, maybe you can start off by sharing with us what are some of the highlights.
Well, I've served for 45 years in the public service, about 15 years in the police, 15 years in the administrative service, and about 15 years in politics. And every one of those has been very meaningful and fulfilling. And I would say that when I was in the police, we were implementing this new community policing scheme based on the Japanese Koban system, and setting up the neighborhood police post, setting up a new way of policing was a very valuable experience. I think I learned. I was also attached to the London Metropolitan Police and other police forces. And the prevailing model of policing at that time was more like what you see in the movie Starsky and Hutch, the fast car, guns. But the Japanese was the complete opposite. The policemen were very, very friendly. They try to find ways and means to help people in order to build the trust and confidence in the police. The police is not there to arrest you, because the vast majority of the population don't commit crime. And we should instead build a meaningful relationship with the vast majority of people who share the same objective as the police in maintaining law and order. So that was a big turnaround in our policing method. So when I became commander of the Jurong Police Station, I had on so many occasions given a little pewter plug to members of the public for helping us in preventing crime, in arresting criminal. In fact, about 1/3 of all our arrests were made with the help of the public. So I think it was for me a major lesson in how we aligned our common purpose, how we mobilized the public to do their part, and how we as a society can come together to achieve common objectives that we can agree on. So that is an experience which carries with me throughout my career, that this partnership, this collaboration among all stakeholders is an important aspect of building effective organizations, building effective societies, where we can come together to agree on common objectives and then work together to achieve those. Now, my next 15 years was in the administrative service. And in the administrative service, I first served as the PPS to the Principal Private Secretary to Mr. Kuan Yew. And I'll say that is a highlight of my career, to be able to serve our founding Prime Minister and to learn so much from him directly, in particular in how we manage international relations. Mr. Lee was very well respected by both the US and China, and I was very fortunate to accompany him on his trips to the US as well as to China. In those days, we were working on a Suzhou Industrial Park project, and in the initial part, there were some hiccups because there was a misalignment of interest between what we had agreed with the central government and what the local officials were doing, because they decided to promote their own industrial park. So we ended up with two rival parks in the same place. And I had a huge respect for Mr. Lee, because when it ran into trouble, he did not hesitate to take it up. He did not hesitate to put it public. Even though some officials had cautioned him that, Mr. Lee, you have such a sterling reputation for being so successful, and this trouble that we have encountered would tarnish your reputation. And he said, I don't care about my reputation. I care whether this project works. And on hindsight, he made the right decision, because China is a very complex country with many layers of government. And the most common phrase that was used by business people is that 天高皇帝远, that the mountains are high and the emperor is far away. So in our own little place, we can do what we want without understanding that Singapore had not entered into this project, to make money or to do anything else except to help the Chinese, and understanding way back in 1995, what are the rules of international commerce, what are the rules of international investment, so that they could create an enabling environment that would allow them to attract investments, that will allow them to build the confidence of investors in investing in China. So I'm glad that the central leadership in Beijing made the right decisions and managed to put the project back on course. And I think Suzhou Industrial Park is now one of the most successful parks. Similarly, when I was with him in the US, he had very good meetings with President Bush Sr., who took him on a tour of the Presidential Library. He stayed with Dr. Kissinger, who had very, very high regard for him. And so I learned a lot going through these meetings and joining him for many of the lunches and dinners. So that has been a major part of it. Then subsequently, when I was in the Ministry of Trade Industry, I was working with Minister George Yeo then, and we were in Doha for the launch of the Doha round. Minister Yeo played a very key part in that launch of the Doha round. But soon after its launch, we realized that there was very little movement, and it would be extremely difficult to get another round of global agreement. So we started free trade agreements, and I was supervising the negotiations and looking at working with all the other ministries to look at how we can make changes to our policy. Because many of the requests from our partner countries will need to be resolved, because some of it will touch on our long-standing policies. And I'm glad that we were able to do that very well. So I myself negotiated the agreement with ASEAN, and then later on with India, but supervised the rest of the negotiation. So I'm very glad that this policy has been continued, and by today, we have 28 free trade agreements, including with the largest economies in the world, the US, China, and in our region, Japan, South Korea, Japan, South Korea, India, and then Australia and New Zealand. And then in the EU, the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, as well as the European Free Trade Agreement, the EFTA, which has 4 countries. And the latest one is with Mercosur, as well as with the Pacific Alliance in South America. So I think it has been a very good run since we started. But it shows the importance of thinking ahead, looking at what are the opportunities that a very trade-dependent country like Singapore can make ourselves relevant, can make ourselves useful. Then thereafter, I went to the Monetary Authority of Singapore. I was the managing director. That was a huge learning experience for me, because I had to attend the central bank governors meeting every 2 months and get to know many of the central bank governors very well, as well as the central bank governors in our region. So we are a very unique organization, the MAS, because it has got both the central banking function as well as a supervisor, an integrated supervisor of finance, from banking to insurance to the capital markets. So combining 2 huge functions into one agency is quite a heavy responsibility. And this was really tested during the global financial crisis, when it was one of the worst financial crises in a long time. And I was glad that I have a very strong team in the MAS, and a very strong support from our chairman, at that time it was Senior Minister Goh Chok Tong. So when the crisis, global financial crisis happened, there were bank runs all over the world. And it was like a domino falling, starting from Ireland all the way down. But we prepared our contingency plan that we would need to respond should our neighboring countries also provide the same bank guarantee. And we're quite confident that our banks and even the foreign banks operating in Singapore are quite sound. So the need for us to the chances of a bank run is not big, and the chances of any loss is not likely to be high, although you can never rule it out. So I was glad that we managed to get the approval of our president, at that time President Nathan, to use $150 billion of our past reserves to guarantee bank deposits. And we also work hard to make sure that we not only manage the crisis well, but we will come out of it stronger. And I'm glad that we did that, because confidence in Singapore went up after the crisis, and we had a very big inflow of funds. Our private banking and asset management industry took off. And today, financial services is about 15% of our GDP, which is very significant. And so whether it's in the Ministry of Trade industry, where we worked very hard to maintain manufacturing and maintain a whole stream of economic activities, or in the MAS, where we were supervising as well as developing the financial center, it's been very fulfilling to see how we have grown, and the foundations that we have built continue to be useful for our current generation. And at the same time that we have so many outstanding individuals, both in our public sector as well as in our private sector, who have been able to work so closely together, both in good times and during crisis, and that we have gradually transformed the Singapore economy. Then in the last, since I entered politics, I was in the Ministry of Education. I am very, it's been a very fulfilling experience in MOE. So starting from preschool, we decided to expand preschool education, provide higher subsidies for kindergartens and childcare. We set up EGDA, the Early Childhood Development Agency, because childcare used to be looked after by MSF, and the kindergartens, which provides the educational component, used to be under MOE. So we decided to create a joint entity called Early Childhood Development Agency that supervises both childcare and kindergartens. And in fact, many have also gone on to full day care, providing both care and education. So I thought that was the right decision for us to make. Then in our schools, I think many of you will recall my "Every School a Good School" tagline, and I'm very glad to see that I spent a lot of time visiting our schools. And in those days, we use the term neighborhood school. It's almost a very derogatory term that, it's not a good school, it's just an ordinary neighborhood school. But when I visited the neighborhood schools, I found that the teachers worked very hard, because as the teachers explained to me, teaching ABCs and 1, 2, 3s are the easy parts of education. But the harder part of education is teaching our students holistically, teaching them to have the social emotional skills, and teaching them the right values. So we then decided to use a term to describe what we are doing, which is a student-centric, values-driven education. Student-centric in that we are able to focus on the students so that we bring all the resources of the school, of our teachers, of our whole education system to provide a student-centric education. And CCA, the co-curricular activities, is very much a part of this education. And then the other part is the citizenship education. So it's Singapore is a very small country. It's important for us to maintain social harmony. That the pledge that we take as every day in our schools, regardless of race, language, or religion, is not just a slogan. That it's not just a pledge. It is really something that we must put into action in our everyday action. So I'm very glad to see that, I grew up at the time of racial riots. I'm very glad to see that today we have achieved a far greater social harmony, far greater understanding. And I hope that we can build on this to make our multiracial, multicultural society and our diversity a source of strength. Because I think young Singaporeans growing up in such a multiracial environment will have a far greater ability to interact with people from all over the world. And that cultural literacy, besides numeracy and literacy, will serve us very well in a much more fragmented, much more contested world. And with the right values, I think trust and confidence in Singaporean, trust and confidence in Singapore will grow. So I hope that we can do more of that. Now, then after education, I came to the Ministry of Finance. It was the first 2 years were fairly easy years. I got to learn the job, but then when the COVID crisis pandemic hit, wow, that was a really tough one. And in 2020, I had to do a total of 5 budgets in 1 year. I was Minister for Finance for 5 years, but I did 10 budgets. And during the COVID period, I had to see the elected president, Halimah, for every budget. And in some of those meetings, I had to ask her for the use of the past reserves. And she and her Council of Presidential Advisor asked very tough questions, very good questions, very tough questions. And we were fully prepared for those. And after very thorough deliberation, they agreed to the use of the past reserves. And those past reserves allowed us to support our people during COVID, to support the Ministry of Health, to be able to manage this crisis of a generation. Because it was a crisis at multiple fronts. It was a healthcare crisis, it was an economic crisis, and it could have gone on to become a financial crisis, but I'm glad that didn't happen. And I'm glad that the cooperation that we had with other countries allowed us to get over this crisis, and the trust and confidence of Singaporeans in what the government was doing and in doing their part, whether it's in wearing masks or taking care of the more vulnerable members of our society, allowed us to really get through the crisis relatively unscathed. And our economy rebounded very quickly because the support package meant that companies didn't have to retrench workers. So when activities resumed, we bounced back very quickly. So I think that is, to me, important lessons on the strength of Singapore. That as finance minister then, that used $40 billion finally for supporting our people. And that is, a billion is 1,000 million, so it's $40,000 million. To be able to do that to support Singaporeans without having to borrow 1 cent, is quite remarkable. And when I thought about it, I said there are very, very few countries, in fact, probably none, who could do that. And for a country with no oil, no minerals, no diamonds, which even has to import our water, to be able to come through this crisis with such a huge amount of past reserves that was used is quite an achievement. And I hope that younger Singaporeans will realize the importance of this and will continue to uphold good governance, continue to uphold proper spending, to stay frugal so that we save for a rainy day, because there will be rainy days to come. We had the Asian crisis, we have the global financial crisis about 10 years later, we had the COVID crisis about another 10 years later. And in a world that is much more contested, much more fragmented, we must expect that there will continue to be storms ahead. But if we stay together as one people, if we have trust and confidence in each other, and in particular between the governments and our people, and with our business community, social organizations, I think Singapore can be a very cohesive society that can be resilient, that can be dynamic. So those are the major. I would say the last 5 years, in fact, the last 9 years, I've also been simultaneously working on the restructuring of Singapore economy. So I set up the Future Economy Council, and thereafter set up the Future Economy. I started the Committee on the Future Economy, and then later on did the Committee of the Future Economy to implement those industry transformation maps. And I mobilized our younger political office holders as well as CEOs of companies to work out those plans and to oversee the implementation. So I'm glad that the first 5 years of implementation has achieved good results. Then we continue with a second 5-year plan, and we issued a report on the progress. And productivity has gone up significantly. Wages of our workers across different income groups have gone up. So for an economy at our stage of development, to be able to continue to grow, and in particular to grow despite the fact that our manpower constraint has become more binding, we didn't have much labor force growth, but we had very good productivity growth. And the future will have to depend very much on productivity growth. And I hope that we can continue to generate this sort of productivity growth by embracing science, technology, and innovation so that we take the Singapore economy onto a different stage.
Thanks, Divya. I think as Singaporeans, we've seen a lot of your mark left on policies all across. But I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes. What were some of the toughest decisions you had to negotiate behind? How do you navigate that?
Well, the toughest decision that I had to decide on is to raise the GST from 7 to 9%. In fact, during that time, my Ministry of Finance officials and I went through all possible options of raising the necessary funds for the future. So first, the reason why we had to raise GST is that we see government expenses continuing to increase, particularly on healthcare, to look after a rapidly aging population. It is inevitable that as the population ages, healthcare expenditure will grow, not just for the individual and the family, but also for the government. And so how do we ensure that we have adequate support for our citizens? So raising GST is never a popular decision. Raising any kind of taxes is not a popular decision, but we looked at all the different ways in which we could generate a revenue, either by taxes in other forms, personal income tax, corporate income tax, all the stamp duties and so on, as well as more reliable, as well as the taxes that cut across the economy like GST. So after studying all these different options, I concluded that the GST is, in a way, the best in that it is also fair. Yeah. And in fact, what many of us don't realize is that the bulk of GST, or rather a substantial part of the GST, is collected from foreigners visiting Singapore, from foreigners living and working in Singapore as they spend, as well as from people from the higher income group. And for the lower income group, in fact, for the vast majority of Singaporeans, the assurance package and the various packages that we have to flow back some of this GST to support them is, in many cases, especially at the lower half of the income group, is actually more than what they pay in the increased GST. And by doing that, we provided very strong support to segments of our society who needs this support. But yet, the overall system allows us to collect more. In terms of the use of the GST, the extra revenue, quite a lot of it will have to be used to take care of our rapidly aging population as healthcare costs goes up. But also in thinking about new ways in which we can continue to build Singapore. The work of building Singapore is never done. And so I started this Singa bond, which is a government bond that, because of the government's good AAA rating, that we are able to get these bonds at relatively low rates. And that allowed us to flow into building long-term projects. And we also had bonds that are green bond as part of our effort to support this green transition. So I think those are useful lessons for us, in that we must always think about the long-term future of Singapore, not just what will happen in the next few years, not just what will happen in the next election. Because for a small open economy that has to compete now in a totally different league. The earlier years, we competed on a basis of low-cost labor and stability in Singapore. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew described it as, a stable oasis in a third world region. But today, our region is also developing rapidly. And so we started the regionalization drive. And now Singapore is one of the largest investors in many of our neighboring countries. And so that in turn builds a certain interdependency, builds synergy with our neighboring country. And we must continue to uphold that, to build this strong partnership with countries around the world, but also particularly with countries in the region, in the Asian region.
Given that this is, what you said is the toughest decision, is there anything you would want to redo or do differently? Or, among the other decisions that you have made, looking back at your long career, is there anything that you would have changed?
I would say no, because I think it's important for us to look back and see what are the things that we have learned from each episode. And I would say that I'm reasonably satisfied that we have been able to make good decisions even in the face of uncertainty about the long term. And even during COVID, for instance, the uncertainty was even greater because we had no idea how fast the COVID pandemic will continue to spread in Singapore and around the whole world. We have no basis to say when the COVID will end, because it was a vast unknown, not only for Singapore but for the whole world. So I would say that if you extrapolate that, at any point in time, we have to make decisions. And the decisions that we make has to be based on whatever facts and figures that we can get at that point, and using that, assessing what the future trajectory is going to be, and then forming a plan that is able to meet those needs, and at the same time have a contingency so that should the future evolve differently, should there be a very sudden, fast change, that we could pivot very quickly into plan B. And I'm glad that we didn't have to pivot too much into Plan B, because I think most of it has worked. And there are, of course, along the way, as we implement those policies, tweaks that we need to make. Yeah. But I would say, in my own experience, it has been a good run. The challenge for us is make sure that we do not just focus our eyes on, we should not just turn our eyes on our back and just look at the past. We should actually be learning how to use binoculars and use a telescope to look further into the future and say what is coming ahead, and how do we reposition ourselves to ride the new landscape ahead.
So given that you have had 40 years in the government and now you are retiring, is there anything you feel like you wanted to move on, like using these binoculars and when you was coming, what would you have liked to move on, or you foresee or hope that the 4G will then move on in the coming terms?
Well, I hope that, first, let me say that I have every confidence in the 4G leadership. I've worked with many of them since I entered politics. And among the 3G ministers, I've worked with them when I was permanent secretary. So I think what I'm very heartened by is that every single one of the 4G leaders is a dedicated, hardworking leader with the interests of Singaporeans and Singapore at heart. So as Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said, he would do his very best to devote himself to the task of leading Singapore. And I'm confident that he will be able to do it well. I'm confident that the support that he can get from the 4G leadership will continue and grow. And at the same time, in this election, we have many new candidates, many who have all been elected. And I hope to see that the next generation of political leadership will evolve out of this batch of MPs. And amongst them, some of them can become ministers in a few years. And that would allow Prime Minister Lawrence Wong to renew the leadership and to continue. And beyond 4G, we should start planning for 5G, 6G. So I do hope that many more younger Singaporeans will take up the mantle and take up this political leadership where they can.
So looking forward, what?
And of course, some of the challenges that they will have to deal with, some will be external challenges. I think globalization, as we had experienced it in the last, 50 years, will change. That you're going to have a more possibly fragmented global system, where countries will begin to think about geopolitical risks. Businesses will have to think about geopolitical risks, as well as unexpected events like the COVID crisis. So I think the global supply chain will change quite significantly, but we are such a major logistics center. I am also hopeful that Singapore can play a part in this and not only make Singapore more resilient, but also makes the world more resilient. So that's one area that they will have to deal with. The second area is science, technology, and innovation. I believe scientific progress will continue. Technological and innovation will thrive, will multiply in many different ways. And innovation in particular that is based on the digital technology and on AI will have a huge impact on the global economy, on every society. If you just look at the proliferation of the internet and now, social media, the way that we communicated when I was young with just a landline has been transformed in the last 60 over years into one where everything is now on the digital media. including sometimes communicating with your own family members. So I think this will change, and we must learn to embrace these changes and make the best use of these changes so that we can enhance our own ability. In particular, I think the use of AI in so many sectors of the economy, in so many aspects of our life, will change the way we work and play. So I think that we should learn how to make the fullest use of this to augment human capabilities and to rethink what jobs of the future will be like, what skills of the future will be like. So these are the challenges that I think the 4G leadership will tackle. How do we embrace science, technology, and innovation to the benefit of our society, to the benefit of our economy? And I would say the third big challenge that you have to deal with is climate change. Climate change is real, and for an island state like Singapore, it is existential. So we have to start preparing plans. We have to mobilize, do our part to work with the global community and even mobilize them where we can to bring some of the best companies from around the world that are doing work on the green transition, on the green technology, to Singapore, and also grow our own timber, grow our own talents and companies to look at sustainability as a key challenge. So if we can continue to restructure our education system so that there can be a stronger focus on the green economy, on the digital economy, on the use of AI, then I think Singapore will have a very good future. And in doing that, do it very carefully to make sure that trust and confidence in each other, trust and confidence in the authority is maintained, and that this very strong tripartite relationship that we have between the government, business, and workers is maintained and enhanced. So those are the external challenges. One big internal challenge that we have to deal with is a rapidly aging population. Yeah. So by 2030, 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be above the age of 65. And we have to rethink what aging means. We used to sort of worry about the silver tsunami, but I think we should take it more positively and look at how can also develop the silver economy, because it is not just Singapore that's aging, it is the whole world that's aging. In our region, China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they're all aging rapidly. In Europe, it's aging rapidly, and even in America, it's aging rapidly. So I believe that we must cooperate globally, and regionally, bilaterally, to tackle this common challenge. So, for instance, I've spoken to economists from China, Japan, and South Korea, and Singapore, and said, why don't we think about what are the economic and financial implications of an aging population? I visited research organizations in the US who are working on healthy longevity, spoken to the very good researchers who are working on this area, on how do we extend not just lifespan but health span, that even as we grow older we can continue to stay active and stay mentally alert. And so a lot of work is going on in this area, and I believe that Singapore can make a useful contribution because we have very high quality research and our people have trust and confidence in the government. And so when we are doing this research, we can garner very strong support from everyone.
I think these challenges that you have all mentioned are quite long-term problems. And I mean, if we look back at when you first announced that you'll be stepping down as the head of the leader of the 4G, one of the things you mentioned is that you have a slightly shorter runway and you were looking to pass on to someone with a longer runway. Mm-hmm. So would these challenges be part of that consideration? Like now looking back, were there other considerations?
Well, that's an excellent observation. So when he started to step down as a leader of 4G, COVID had just struck, and it was quite unclear at that time how long the COVID pandemic would last. Would it last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And I'm glad that Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong announced that he will stay on until the crisis is over. And with no visibility, I think, and then when I look back at Singapore's history, since our founding, we only had 3 prime ministers, and each of them have served several terms. And because of the majority that we have in Parliament, and because of the long tenure of our prime ministers, every one of them has adopted long-term thinking, strategic thinking, and many of these policies will only take 10, 15 years before you can see results. Many of these big waves that are coming at us day by day, but for which most of us will not see until you go through the details and see the big waves coming at us. But if we continue to have that long-term strategic thinking, that consistency of purpose, then I think we can overcome these challenges well. And for that to happen, I think you need a leadership that is able to not only build on the work of past generation, but able to hold a steady course during that time. Now, this is very different from politics in many other countries, that you have a change of government and then the policy direction is changed. And this is, when I was education minister, I spoke to a number of different education ministers as well as researchers on education system. Now, unfortunately, in many places, the education system goes through zigzags. One minister comes along and say, well, the previous minister another party has done a bad job and we must now turn. And so they will turn in the other direction. And then the next party comes in, or the original party comes in and says, no, that was a wrong turn, we should turn back again. And once you go through that zigzag, you don't make much progress. And in particular, it is very stressful for teachers on the ground because it takes a long time to see the results of education. And the Chinese have a saying, 10年种树百年树人, that it takes really 100 years to see some of this result. So it's not a big exaggeration. It is true, and I've seen it personally, that even the changes that I made in MOE is now taking its effect amongst the younger generation who are now graduating from schools. So I think that long-term orientation is going to be very important. There will, of course, be more challenges. In the age of social media, in the age of short attention span, it's much harder for people to say, no, let's think long-term. But I do hope that Singapore can stay exceptional in that regard, that we do not just look at what is trendy, what is, hip and trendy, but rather what is enduring, what are fundamental strengths that will allow us to stay our course.
So the long runway is one of the public reasons that it's so good. And then now with the benefit of
that's one reason. And the other reason, by the way, is that when I accepted the leadership of the 4G, I had just recovered from my stroke. I'm very glad that my team had confidence in me. But when I think about the longer term challenges that Singapore has, when I think about my own medical history, when I think about the demands of the job, I decided that it will be better for a younger person with a longer runway, with a better energy to carry it through. Now in Singapore, given our parliamentary system, every minister is also a member of parliament, and it is like 2 jobs or sometimes more, because in making policies, one has to be very thoughtful and deliberate about it. Is you have to look at the data, you have to look at the analysis, and you have to look at the options. So it's not just a simple signing of a document and say let's get going. And one aspect of Singapore's strength in policy making is that our attention to details, our attention to implementation, because policies do not work until it is implemented on the ground. And so the last mile connection is a critical part of it. So it will take time. And secondly, as a member of parliament, the demands are very heavy because in Singapore, our MPs engage the community in so many different ways. For instance, every Monday, for most of us, and for myself, I've been doing on Monday, we do our Meet the People session. And we have almost all the weekends are taken up with engagement activities with our citizens, with our residents. And many of our big days are also spent doing that. So it's a very demanding job. When I first became MP, I hardly ate at home because, 5-6 days a week, I was out either attending official functions related to the ministry or in the constituency serving our residents. So it's a extremely demanding job. So I felt that if I were to become the Prime Minister, one other very important job is to engage globally, because Singapore must build good relationships with countries in the region, with countries in the world. And as a Prime Minister, you have to travel quite a lot, not only to attend international meetings, but also to make bilateral visits, to build relationships with other countries. So it's an extremely demanding job. And I felt that, I think it's better for someone younger to do so. And I'm glad that the team has chosen Lawrence Wong as the Prime Minister. And I have every confidence that he will do his very best.
So now in hindsight, we look at it, when you announced that you would be stepping down from being the leader of the 4G, we also now know that it was also your last term as elected MP in the government, because you have now just resigned, right? So did that also factor into your decision? Like, why have you chosen to resign now at this point?
No, I didn't choose to retire.
Yes.
Yeah. So I chose to retire because having served in the public service for 45 years, it has been a long period of service. And I have a very bad work habit, which is once I commit to doing something, I put my heart and soul into it. I put 100% effort, sometimes more than that. And I have very little time for my family or myself. And in particular, after I entered politics, it was even more demanding. So when I had my stroke 9 years ago, actually many residents told me that, Mr. Heng, you should retire. We have done quite a lot, and you should take care of your health. But I decided to stay on because first, I'm very grateful that I was born in Singapore and that we have such a system that allowed someone, a poor boy from living in a kampong, to be able to go abroad to study, to be able to have such a meaningful career. And I do hope that I can do my part to continue to enable even younger Singaporeans to have the same opportunities as I had. And so that I was also very grateful to my doctors for the support that they gave me, for the high quality of medical care that they gave, which allowed me to recover fully. And in fact, I was also very grateful that I actually collapsed during a cabinet meeting. And cabinet has a few doctors. One of them, Dr. Janil, happened to be in the emergency ward for children. He was a pediatric doctor who specialized in medical emergency. So he was treating me like a baby, and I had a full recovery because I had not much loss of brain oxygen. So I'm very grateful that I am not only alive but well. So I thought when I'm still well, I should continue do my part. And what I did was to make sure that I regulate my schedule slightly better. And I do exercise practically every day. So that has allowed me to recover well this last 9 years and continue to maintain a fairly healthy lifestyle. My doctors have made it a point to get me to go back for regular checkups. And as you grow older, you begin to have all sorts of small issues. It's always every 6 months I get another warning about take care of your health, and I sort of redouble my efforts. But at the same time, it makes you realize that life has its limit, and you should make the best use of it while you can, to spend time with your loved ones, to have some time to explore, and my interests. So I've decided that. So I told Prime Minister Lawrence Wong over just after he took over that I would like to retire. In fact, I had decided on that before that, and but after I didn't want to disturb him. So after the successful handover, I said I will retire if the transition continues to go well for the rest of the year and when you call for the next election. So I'm very glad that the 4G leadership has supported Prime Minister Wong so well, and he had grown in stature, he had grown in confidence, and he has built rapport with our citizens. The recent election outcome is a testament to that. So I think I can now retire with a very clear conscience and with very strong confidence that Singapore is in very good hands. Yeah.
What is your future plan? What is the next step for you?
My future plan. Well, first, I'm going to spend my time not doing any work for the next 6 months to a year, because as I said, I have very bad work habits. I work long hours. I don't have much time for myself. I hope to spend more time with my wife and children and my extended family, and two, I hope to spend more time continuing to my exercise and taking good care of my health. I hope to spend time traveling to all my favorite places, as well as to read my favorite books and listen to my music, so that I can slow down. Yeah, and then I'll decide what else might be meaningful for me to do later. I've been advising people that please don't retire, sit back and do nothing, because your brain will go, your body will go. And so I must heed my own advice to others that please continue to stay active, stay engaged, and but do something different where you can. And if I can draw on my experience to be helpful, whether in Singapore or outside Singapore, I'll consider it seriously and do my part. Yeah.
So is the door still open to coming back to public life after that break?
But only if I am absolutely needed. Do you have something in mind?
But there's another role, that you are still carrying on. If you look back, you talk about electoral politics, you're still the chairman of the PAP. Is that a role you plan to continue?
No, I will. I don't. We didn't have time to discuss with Secretary General, so I will certainly discuss with him very soon. Yeah. After the new cabinet has been sworn in, I would certainly discuss with him.
And within the party, in your term with the CEC, what then do you hope to see the future of the party break?
Well, for a party to be in power for ever since our independence and even before our independence when we attained self-government, I think it is a remarkable track record. And I would attribute that to the foundation that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, our founding Prime Minister and our founding Secretary General, built. In that, his emphasis on our vision, party's vision of building a fair and just society has been the guiding light for all our work. And his vision of ensuring that Singapore stays useful and relevant to the world, that we, at every turn of events, we seek to be useful and relevant to the world. Because if we are not useful and relevant, why would the world care about whether Singapore exists? And I think that makes us take on a much more global outlook. If you are living in a very big country, you can, in some ways, even ignore the world and say, I'll make my own rules, I will change my rules and so on. You can afford to do that, even though it is going to be damaging to them in the long run and to the world in the long run. But in the short run, you could do all of that. In Singapore, we don't even have the luxury of doing that in the short run, nor should we do that morally, because I think we must have a sense of common humanity, that whether, regardless, in Singapore we say regardless of race, language or religion, and we should extend that regardless of which place you're born in, regardless of the color of your skin or your race, we are one humanity, and we should find common things to bond us as one common humanity. We should take a more global outlook in terms of protecting this little planet that we live in, which has given so much life on Earth. So I think it's important for us to continue to build Singapore's relevance. And so as a party, the PAP must continue to uphold this vision of building a fair and just society, and at the same time, be very open to changes, that no period of time will be identical to the past. The future will always bring different changes. The future will always bring surprises. And for us as a party, it is important for us to first and foremost win the trust and confidence of fellow Singaporeans. Because if fellow Singaporeans do not support us as a party, if they don't believe that we are doing right by Singaporeans, the party would fade. Yeah. And I believed in what Mr. Lee said earlier, that he cares more about the future of Singapore than just the future of the party. But at the same time, I would add that, therefore, I think till today, we are the most credible party, because we have upheld the right principles, the right values, and have the right vision, and that we have done the right thing, as a result of which Singapore has progressed, Singaporeans' lives have progressed. We've all been uplifted. Mr. Lee promised that, never fear, that we will turn the mud flat into a modern metropolis. And we have achieved that. When I travel around the world, so many world leaders, whether it's in the political sphere, in the academic sphere, or in the business sphere, have such high regard for Singapore. I feel very proud as a Singaporean. But at the same time, it is important that we don't just feel proud. We must also feel paranoid, because if we indulge in our successes and forget that the world is changing very quickly, very swiftly, then we may end up becoming too complacent, and that we are not as nimble and dynamic as we need to, as we should be. Then I think that will spell the downfall of Singapore. So I think it's important, both as a country, both as a people, as well as a party, to continue this. How long would the PAP last? I can't tell, right? all that I can say is that we must continue to look ahead to the future, to look at the challenges ahead of us for Singapore, for Singaporeans, and then craft the right policies, even if it may be unpopular, to do the right thing, because we will be validated in the long run. But never be complacent, never be proud of our past. We should be humble about while we are proud of what we have achieved, we should be humble about our ability to meet the future and rally together to meet whatever challenges that may come our way in the future. Stay united as one people, because I grew up at a time of racial riots, and for me personally, to see the transformation of Singapore over these 6 decades, as we celebrate SG60, for me to see how we have moved from a period of poverty, unemployment, racial strife, to one where 80% of Singaporeans now that live in our HDB flats, with a vast majority owning their own flats, and the other 20% living in private housing, with us having this ethnic integration across our public estates. I think our children going to school together is a great source of satisfaction. And with so many of our religious leaders understanding, in fact all our religious leaders understanding this. After my recovery from my stroke, I attended the event by the interreligious organizations, and all 10 religious leaders came forward to talk to me, and they said, Mr. Heng, we're very glad to see that you have recovered fully. I said, no, I'm so glad too, and I'm very, very grateful. And then that so many Singaporeans gave me their support, wrote me thousands of cards, get well wishes, and so on, that I felt very strongly supported, certainly by my family, by my doctors and nurses and therapists, but also by fellow Singaporeans whom I've never met, but they all wrote very lovely cards. I still kept them. So that's one of my retirement things that I have to bring from office down to home. And the religious leader said, Mr. Heng, every one of them said, we prayed for you. So I say, oh, thank you very much. I'm so blessed by every single religion and every religious leaders. So I think that has been a great source of satisfaction to see how that the pledge that we took as a kid in school, is deepening in reality in our society. I'm not saying that we have zero incidents of racial discrimination or religious discrimination. What I'm saying is that compared to the past, we have made huge progress, and we must continue this journey of building Singapore as a harmonious, cohesive society. And when Singapore is harmonious and cohesive, when Singapore has a sense of the future, that we need to prepare ourselves for the future and not just bask in our past, when we have this sense of unity, this ability to work together, then Singapore can continue to make very good progress. Yeah.
I'm mindful of the time, so I should just a few questions maybe related to the most recent general election. Sure. I mean, you had already announced your retirement, but we still saw you out there every day with the East Coast team and elsewhere. What is one thing that stood out to you?
Well, the one thing which first I decided that even though I've decided to retire and not contest in the election, it is my responsibility to ensure that my new team, who is relatively new to our residents, get their fullest support. So I was working very closely with Dinesh to bring him around, and during that 9 days of campaigning, I shared many of the things that I had done and Dinesh and the new team are totally new to politics. The Dinesh and the Haslinder completely new to politics, and I tried as best as I could during that 9 days to pass on my knowledge, my experience. And what stood out for me during the campaign was the warmth of our residents in East Coast, because many of them thanked me for the service. Many of them felt that I was retiring too early. I said, why don't you continue? I said, no, I have actually worked for so many years, and I would like to have some time for my family and for myself, but I will continue to contribute in whatever ways I can. So I am glad that my residents have been so appreciative of the work that we have done, and I'm also very glad that many of them came up to me and spoke and told me about the specific things I have done for them. Because there are some cases where they came to see me at the Meet the People session, where I meet them during house visits, and they said, oh, Mr. Heng, thank you for solving this or that problem for me, whether it's related to housing, to their children's education, or their own employment, or to financial hardships that some of them might have fallen into, or to issues with certain agencies. They have been able to resolve quite a number of those. They also thank me for the improvements in East Coast and how the East Coast plan has been implemented. Yeah. One very memorable incident was that someone who was doing food delivery was riding up the slope, and I was walking down towards a traffic junction, and he came back chasing after me. I said, so I thought, I didn't order any food. And he said, no, Mr. Heng, I came back here to thank you for your service. And I, as a delivery rider, I ride around the whole estate. I can see such improvements in Bedok and East Coast. So I was really very grateful that he came back to thank me. I had a couple in their early 50s who, after seeing me walking around campaigning with Dinesh, went to the wet market to buy a very nice bouquet of flowers. I said, Mr. Heng, thank you. I also had a lady who did a drawing herself, a very lovely drawing, who then waited for me to give me her work. I had one of our hawkers, when I was walking around our hawker center and our wet market, one of our they all thanked me for the work we had done, including the upgrading of the hawker center. And one of the hawkers came out, that was a few weeks before the election. He said, Mr. Heng, we now have a 5-star toilet, because our upgrading work was very well done. And we had new hand dryers installed in the toilet, and he liked it so much. I had residents who came and thanked me for this wash basins that we installed in different parts of the hawker center to maintain the hygienic conditions. And they said, oh, that is so useful. So I am very glad that we were able to do that. And it's not just my work. I think what I'm really heartened by is it's the work of all 5 of us in East Coast. It is also the work of our staff and supporting us in this, and the hundreds of volunteers who turn up, week after week to support us in our outreach activities, to support us in the party activities, and the party activists spending their time and sometimes even money to help us to look after our residents. So I think it's been very heartwarming. Yeah.
I mean, so you have done 3 elections where you were contesting, and this is your 4th one kind of as an observer.
Yes.
What are some shifts you've seen in voter expectations or in public discourse?
Well, I think the biggest change in these 15 years has been the use of social media. I think the social media has become a key part of the elections. And it's not just, so the traditional rallies have become less important. It's the social media, but still important. So we too held our traditional rally. And I think that'll be one big change. The other big change, which I think, which I saw coming even back in 2011, is the importance of engaging our residents and communicating our policies. So when I was in the Ministry of Education, I started a communications and engagement group within the ministry. Because when you think about education, I said many times that education doesn't happen in the minister's office, but education happens in the moments-to-moments interaction between the student and the teacher and among the students. So, and education doesn't happen even just in the school. It happens everywhere. It happens at home. Yeah. The Chinese have a saying, 言教不如家教. So how parents role model themselves at home, what values parents display are the critical ones. Because you cannot teach a child to be more caring if the parents say, come, don't care, just spend your time to study. Then whatever values that we try to inculcate will be lost. So I think parents have the greatest influence on a child's development, especially when they are young. And so it's very important for us to continue to build on this partnership amongst everyone. And so in the same way, if I take it from there, that in education, the effective way to raise a child properly, holistically, is not just focus on grades and exams, but also on how we develop the whole person. And that takes not just the teacher or the parents, but the whole society. What do we as a society stand for? What are our values as a society? What do children see when they are out in the streets? So I think that holistic effort, that whole society effort, is important for our future. So in terms of those changes, of course our electorates have much higher expectations, and but at the same time, I think understanding. So going back to communications and engagement, I think we need to communicate better with all our residents on the rationale of policy changes, on the part that they can play. We must find as many opportunities as possible for our citizens to take part in decision making, and even better, to take part in getting things done. Because, for instance, if we say that we want to build a more caring society, it's easy to talk about it. And in some societies, I've heard citizens said, look, it is a job of the government because I paid such high taxes, and the government should now hire people to look after people with needs. Now, I think that doesn't make for a good society. I think a good society is one where everyone feels that I have a sense of ownership of this society. I can help. I can do my part to build the society that I want. And that is the reason why a few years back I started the Singapore Together movement. Because we should not have a society where, the political leadership and the public service is in the boat rowing, and then citizens are just standing on the riverside, and then you have a small number of disgruntled citizens who are just throwing stones and say this is no good, that's no good. Because if you truly believe that it's no good, that we can do better, then come in and row together. And when I started that movement, I had so many of the participants who came up to me and said, wow, I didn't realize that, it is so different when you are doing the rowing. Because then you begin to realize the full dimension of any of the challenges that we face. So, my conclusion is that talk is easy, doing is a hard part. But to build a better society, it is not by talking, it is by doing. And I do hope that we are a society of doers, that whatever that we seek to achieve, let's do it. Let's come together and do it. Yeah.
DPM, can I just follow up on two things you said?
Sure.
So, when you're talking about the aging population and you say we have to rethink what aging means, right? So I'd like to ask, as someone who is on the cusp of that age, what does aging mean to you?
Well, I think if we look around the world, and certainly in Singapore, our lifespan has increased significantly. When I was serving in the police, the retirement age for police officers was 45 for the junior officers. And I had a few cases where my colleagues in the police, soon after retirement, passed on. And so the CPF withdrawal age was 55 at that time. But I think now with rising lifespan, I think people are living longer. We are now all above, our average lifespan is now above 80 and higher for ladies. So that's one. And two, I think people are a lot healthier. So our health span has also increased. And when we think about rethinking aging, it is that we should think of aging as a next stage of life, that when we are past 65, I would say first, the need for those of us who are above 60, above 65, to first take better care of our health, to ensure that we continue to exercise, to adopt healthy lifestyle, to keep ourselves mentally and socially active. And there are many people in my generation who are retiring, who are holding professional jobs. So I think you'll be a loss if they just do nothing. That whether they undertake to do, advisory role in corporate settings, in social organizations, or in volunteering for certain causes. I think all those are all meaningful activities. At the same time, I think Singapore must remain plugged in globally. That what we have achieved in Singapore offers valuable learning points for other nations as well. And as part of one humanity, I think we should be willing to share with others what have worked for us, but without imposing our solutions on anybody. Because I think we should bring people from around the world to learn from one another. How do you deal with a problem with aging population if we have the same issue? How do we come together to deepen our collaboration in science and technology? How do we bring together to deepen our collaboration among companies, particularly if they are working on common causes? For instance, I spent some time in Europe, which has taken climate change a lot more seriously than many places, and looking at the green technologies that they've developed. And I've mentioned to many of them that this will be very useful in our part of the world. I've also recently, I've visited China twice in the last 1.5 years or so, and had excellent meetings with Vice President Han Zheng, who was Vice Premier at the time when I was DPAM, and we were co-sharing the Joint Council for Bilateral Cooperation. And we had a very warm and productive relationship, and we were looking at what I recently asked him, how is China dealing with this aging population? And he said, well, in China, they have also set up a whole range of activities, including university for seniors. And many of the seniors are now going back to school to learn new things, to learn fun things. And I think that is a very healthy way. And we should be willing to learn from others. And we ourselves should be willing to innovate and say, well, what is it that will meet Singapore's needs even better? And I can see us continuing to do that in a number of areas.
Okay, and then my last question is, you kind of describe yourself as, a bit of a workaholic, always gives like 100%, more than 100%. So is there anything, or rather, what will you find hardest to let go?
What would I find?
Hardest to let go or to put down?
So, no, I'm psychologically prepared to do nothing for a while. Yeah. But as to how long I would be how long I can do that, I don't know. I will certainly be happy to look at my next challenge, which I will find personally meaningful and fulfilling. That I'll find that I can continue to make a contribution to others. So what that is, I have a few broad topics in mind. One is acting on my own work. I feel my work of restructuring the Singapore economy. I am keen to look at how, in the next phase of development, in particular with science, technology, and innovation, what will be the next phase of the development of the Singapore economy, given my belief about how Asia will continue to grow and transform, whether there are opportunities for us to be more engaged in the growth of Asia. And it's not just Asia, because I think while Asia has the highest projection for growth in the coming years, I think other parts of the world will grow too. And in fact, the developed world, US, Japan, and Europe, have excellent companies, still have very excellent companies that will be able to value add in the Asian region. And so we must continue to explore win-win partnerships which can benefit both sides and which can uplift all peoples. So that's one area which I am keen to look at. Having been chairman for the National Research Foundation now for many years, I found it fascinating because I used to, when I was a student, I love science, and but in fact I wanted to study engineering when I went to university, but the Public Service Commission didn't allow me to do that. They asked me to do economics. Yeah. And I should share a very funny story. I said, but they said, well, we only give you a scholarship if A, you study economics, and B, you go to the police force. So I said, well, if I go to the police force, shouldn't I be studying law, and I can see that studying engineering will be even more useful because at least I can think about engineering solutions to crime problem. And the chairman had a little twinkle in his eyes and said, no, being a policeman, you need to know how to budget and how to spend money wisely. And I said, I looked puzzled, and they said, well, at one stage, one of your officers made a bad decision of buying certain kinds of vehicles and raincoats, and it was a waste of public fund. Oh, I said, yes, sir. Frankly, I wasn't convinced, but anyway, I had no choice. And I was fortunate to have done well in economics during my A-level exams. So I thought maybe I'll give it a try. That in life we may decide to do A, and I'm convinced that I've always been very convinced that I'll be very good with engineering, with maths and science, but I ended up doing humanities. But it turned out to be a right decision because I think I couldn't have run MAS without some background in finance. I couldn't have been a very good finance minister without some background in finance. I couldn't have done the restructuring of the Singapore economy without some basic knowledge of economics. So I think it has been, my conclusion is that, whatever life throws at you, make the best of it. So I'm glad that I've done all right. And my advice to young people is, whatever that you may encounter, just make the best of it. Because we may decide on the course of action in a certain direction. But sometimes there will be new developments which we have never anticipated, and for which you just do your best and make the best of it. I have never expected myself to enter politics, to be a minister and to be a DPM. And well, at every stage I just made the best of it. And I hope that in the process, certainly in the process, I have found fulfillment in all that I've done. But in the process, I hope that I've made a little contribution to improve the lives of Singaporeans, to improve the chances of success of this little red dot. And of course, enjoyed very much my international interactions, because I think being able to have so many leaders from all over the world, having such high respect for Singapore and having formed such a good relationship with them, that I think it has been a great joy. And certainly when I was in MOE, interacting with so many teachers and with so many professors in the universities during my work as the chairman of National Research Foundation, it has been a very inspiring and enlightening moments for me as well.